Well, the NBA offseason continues for the defending world champion Golden State Warriors. And on with me today is a longtime NBA journalist, a former beat reporter for the Golden State Warriors, who now covers the NBA at large for the NBA, among many. And you've done a lot of work over the years, Mark. Excited to have you on. There's a lot to discuss, and we're going to tackle it, including free agency, Kevin Durant, how the youngsters are looking. Are they done with free agency? There's still some players out there. We're going to try to delve into all that, tackle it all, and then some. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. You can follow Mark Medina, a writer for NBA.com and the NBA in general, at MarkG_Medina. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Twitter at DogSurfRoadshow. Mark, it's been a wild offseason. I mean, the Kevin Durant trade request, I think, really just flew through everything. All the papers in the air scattered right now. I feel like the entire offseason's on hold until Durant and that whole scenario is kind of figured out. What's the latest on the Durant trade front from what you've covered? And do you have any early predictions in terms of what's going to happen there?
Yeah, it's been wild to say the least, Cyrus. And first off, excited to be on the podcast.
Dude,
as far as the latest with Kevin Durant, everything's fluid. I mean, I was talking with an agent the other day, and he was saying, yeah, there's 16 offers that he's getting. And I, countered, well, I'm sure there'll be 13 more to fulfill, that every team wants Kevin Durant. And he was like, yeah, that's probably the case. So, it's fluid. I think the Brooklyn Nets, they're entertaining all sorts of offers. And I think that, when you talk to people around the league, there's kind of a general unknown of what domino is going to fall first.
Mm-hmm.
Are the Nets going to try to take care of, finding a deal for Kevin Durant first and then Kyrie Irving, or is it in reverse? And there's not really clarity on what front that'll move. I think a lot of it will just kind of depend on circumstance, because on one hand, Kevin Durant has a lot of interested suitors, but the Nets have to sort through what are good offers, what are bad offers, how much more can they extract out of value, where Kyrie Irving's on the opposite end of the extreme, where, let's just be frank, the Lakers are really the only team involved here. And so I think the Nets, just want to be mindful that the Lakers don't really have much to offer. So how can they get other teams involved so they can get the most assets? And so as a result of that, there's not much clarity of which domino is going to fall first. And there's a lot of complicated things that the Nets have to sort through with both teams. But if I had to guess what happens, I think Kevin Durant winds up on the Phoenix Suns. I think Kyrie Irving winds up on the Lakers. But there's a lot of steps in between for that to happen.
Gotcha. And first off, I'm sorry to not have the warm introduction. It is great to see you again, Mark. Our paths have crossed a bunch of times in various press areas and whatnot. And you're just one of the nicest individuals in the media game. Thank you so much for coming on. You mentioned Kevin Durant possibly going to the Suns. I know this one of two teams that's been reported that he's expressed interest in being traded to. But would the Nets make that trade if Devin Booker isn't included? And if Devin Booker is included, is that a worthwhile trade? I mean, I feel like you're just trading one superstar for another. You're not really moving up that much. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I don't think the Nets are going to just make a deal to placate Kevin Durant. I think in an ideal world, you can find a trade partner that's win-win for both. But when you're talking about a superstar player that has 4 years on his contract, at the end of the day, the team's going to prioritize what's best. So I think with the Suns, I don't think that they're going to put Devin Booker up in an offer. He just signed to an extension. There's rules with that would prohibit him from being traded right away anyway. So I think any deal would have to involve a DeAndre Ayton sign-in trade, and then just a handful of role players like a Mikal Bridges, a Cam Johnson, a Jay Crowder, and draft picks. And now it's a matter of how many role players can they involve, how many draft picks can they involve, and will they have to get a third team in the mix here? But yeah, Devin Booker's not going anywhere. Chris Paul's not going anywhere. So I think in Kevin Durant's case, the Suns would still be optimal because they would have, good players around him as well as a good head coach, Monty Williams. So it wouldn't be like the repeat of, when Carmelo Anthony got traded to the Knicks, where all of a sudden he landed with the Knicks, but there's really no serviceable pieces around him because they all went to the Denver Nuggets. But
Right.
we'll have to see if a third team gets involved here. And, I think that, as Brian Windhorst infamously had laid out earlier this week about the Utah Jazz, I mean, they are a team. Yes, they are a team that is getting involved here. So I wouldn't be surprised that at some point, maybe they can get in the sweepstakes of, either Donovan Mitchell being involved or other assets because, Danny Ainge is one aggressive executive.
I love that about him. You're absolutely right, man. I heard a report this morning from Chris Haynes' podcast that the Nets had proposed a trade with the Minnesota Timberwolves to send Kevin Durant there for Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, and 4 first-round picks. And the Timberwolves obviously shook their head at that. I mean, that would be just an absolutely absurd trade. But it also revealed what the Nets think they should get for Durant. And that's why I just don't see DeAndre Ayton being like a player that wows, Sean Marks enough to make a Suns trade happen. It's fascinating just in the sense that Durant, I think, clearly wants to get traded. There's no doubt of that. I mean, people are talking about maybe Durant just stays with the Nets. The trade doesn't happen, but all indications are he wants to get out of that scene. But at the same time, the Nets want so much. And this leads to the Golden State Warriors because I feel like of all the teams with all the assets out there, Shams Charania reported that there's 4 teams he listed that are particularly interested and in pursuit of KD. The Suns, the Heat, and then the Raptors are a wild card, and then the Warriors are the dark horse here. But they have the assets. I don't support Kuminga being included in any trades. It would pain me to see the pool party leave in a trade unless you're getting Seth Curry back. I could stomach that a little more. I've seen some 3-teamers involved where Ben Simmons could get shipped as well to make it legal for Andrew Wiggins to be included in a trade. Look, it wouldn't surprise me. Look, you covered this team for years. You were around the Warriors during this whole dynasty, especially the 5 straight trips to the NBA Finals. So you know Lacob, you know Goober, and I know Lacob's the controlling partner, so his say is probably final. Lacob loves Durant. How realistic, even though it is unlikely, but there is a chance. How realistic, in your opinion, is it that the Warriors land KD? And what kind of assets do you think would be moved around if that trade did happen?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's realistic here. Marcus Thompson from The Athletic, who's as plugged in as anyone, I mean, he hit it on the head that, the Warriors stars have certainly been in touch with Kevin Durant, but this idea that this is going to actually happen seems unlikely for both sides. I mean, from Kevin Durant's end, and I know Warrior fans feel split on this, but the reason why he left the Warriors to begin with was he wanted to fulfill another challenge. He got there and won 2 titles, got 2 finals MVPs out of 3 finals appearances. And, whether this is the right or wrong way to look about it, like he didn't feel like completely fulfilled after winning those titles, because I think after having those accomplishments, there was a lot of commentary. Well, this is almost an asterisk because you're doing this with the Warriors with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala. This championship isn't as of much value as it would be in normal circumstances.
Right.
So, I think it's one thing for Kevin Durant to want to leave the Brooklyn Nets, whether it's because he suddenly has misgivings about Kyrie Irving. My hunch is that's not what it is. I think he's looking at it more from an organizational standpoint. But I think that's then a leap of faith to then say, oh, I want to go back and put the toothpaste out in the tube with the Warriors. But I think on the Warriors end, yes, they would certainly be open and have that conversation with Kevin. But I think that they want to draw a line in the sand where, let's not get it twisted. Kevin Durant's still one of the best players in the NBA, and you're automatically that much better when you have him. But I think that they're trying to protect not only their short-term championship hopes, but their long-term. And so here's where deals get complicated. Andrew Wiggins is almost a non-starter unless the Nets suddenly involve Ben Simmons because of, the salary cap deals,
right,
or the CBA deals as far as extensions go. And then, as far as like who the Warriors would be willing to take to part ways with, maybe some combination of Kuminga and Wiseman. But I think once you start adding more and more players like a Jordan Poole, like an Andrew Wiggins, if, Ben Simmons goes elsewhere, that's where I think the Warriors would start getting leery of, okay, maybe as of right now, they would still be a better team with Kevin Durant. But what's this going to do for our long-term future? And I think what the
Right.
Warriors have shown this year is that they've been able to thread the needle of still winning now while developing on the fly here. And I don't think that they want to compromise those things. But you know what? I don't even think the Warriors will have to entertain that philosophical discussion and how much they're willing to, toe the line and which line they won't cross, because I don't think that Kevin Durant would have interest with reuniting with the Warriors, because there's a reason why he left
Yeah.
Golden State. And you know what? I understand why he left Golden State. I don't think it really had to do with anything negative with the Warriors. His time with the Warriors is mostly positive. I think it had everything to do with wanting to fulfill a new challenge. And with that being said, I think that that's then been a leap of faith to then say, hey, how about I team up with Kyrie Irving? Obviously, that hasn't led to much success. So that's where I think Kevin Durant is reconsidering. But again, as far as I know, I don't think KD has any misgivings with Kyrie. It's more about how the organization's handling
Yeah.
everything. But I think when you're looking at it objectively, obviously Kyrie is part of the Nets culture. I think Kevin Durant is also part of the Nets culture. So there is a little bit of, I think, self-reflection, accountability that Kevin has to take, even if he, is very well warranted with wanting to leave Brooklyn, considering what's happened. He's obviously had, responsibility in the circumstances. From a basketball standpoint, Kevin's been great, but obviously he's had a hand in what the Nets have been doing from a culture standpoint, enabling Kyrie, as well as, the players that they put together here. So I think that, when you take all those things into consideration, there's a lot of fault to go around, KD included.
Yeah, absolutely right, man. And you wrote a column called, the title of the column is, and this was for NBA.com. It's titled "4 Keys to Warriors Offseason Approach After Winning a 4th NBA Championship in 8 years." And when we come back, I want to go one by one with those 4 keys to see how the Warriors are doing so far in your eyes. First, I want to try to save people as much money as possible. Prices at the gas pump. Mark, you and I are in California, man. It's especially asinine what's going on here, but really across the country, gas prices are just ridiculous, and people need to drive. So there's a way you can save money, though, and that's Rock Auto, and more importantly, rockauto.com, the website, which is available at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? An example being a Honda Odyssey fuel pump, $353 from a chain store. It's only $216 from Rock Auto, and they're a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write "Locked On" in their "How did you hear about us" box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. For your second listen, get up to date on the latest news and rumors in the NBA in just 30 minutes every day with Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA, your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. You can follow NBA writer Mark Medina on Twitter at @MarkG_Medina. Mark, you wrote a great column. Again, it was titled "The 4 Keys," and pardon me if I'm not semantically reading this, but it's 4 keys to the Warriors offseason approach after winning their 4th championship in 8 years. The first key you wrote is adding prospects. With the 28th pick, they added Patrick Baldwin Jr., a pick that basically had a lot of people shrugging their shoulders. I didn't see one person's mock draft correctly nailing that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've never seen it. And then they went ahead and spent $2 million to move up 7 spots in the second round to get Ryan Rollins. They also added Guy Santos. What are your thoughts on the draft picks of the Warriors and any other additional offseason moves they made so far in terms of rookies and draft picks?
Yeah, well, look, as far as it comes to the draft, it's really hard to praise or criticize these kind of draft picks at 28 and later on the second round.
It is.
The reality is at number 28, I think in the Warriors case, hey, they found a good player in Jordan Poole, didn't find a good player in Jacob Evans. But historically, really the only gem of a 28 pick is Tony Parker with the San Antonio Spurs. The rest of 28 pick histories, most of them are, decent role players that can, log double-digit seasons. There's a handful that don't even last beyond 4 seasons. There's a handful that don't even play an NBA game. So, like, the return of success rate on that is very unknown. But, it seems like on paper it'll be fine, but we're also in an information vacuum where we don't quite know what we're going to get. And in Guy Santos' case, I mean, look, he looked intriguing in Summer League. Hey, he's this Brazilian prospect. Looks like he knows the game. But it's Summer League, right? Like, these games don't mean anything. The other thing with Rollins, I mean, he's been hurt. He's not going to be able to play in Summer League. So while Summer League in and of itself doesn't necessarily matter that much, that's just lost opportunity for him to be able to get some development, get some on-court time. So that, I think, going into the draft and after the draft, we knew that this is an unknown until the season actually starts. But yeah, the second thing is retaining their key free agents. And look, calling a spade, the Warriors struggle with that. They got Kevon Looney, that's great, but they lost Otto Porter Jr. They lost Gary Payton II. I think Otto Porter Jr. was inevitable, and really there wasn't anything that the Warriors could do because they didn't have his bird rights. They could only really sign him to a veteran minimum deal.
Or the mid-level. And they could have, in theory, matched Toronto, but I hear what you're saying. They were limited, yeah.
Yeah. But Toronto, even with the mid-level, Toronto's money was a lot more. So you can't fault Otto Porter Jr. for doing that. It's a better deal. But Gary Payton II, they had his bird rights. They could have kept him. And here, unfortunately, this is an example where, as much as the Warriors do talk about, hey, for the most part, it's about having guys that will ensure their championship success as opposed to luxury taxes. They felt like they could win a championship without Gary Payton II. You know what? Look, it's all going to come down mostly to their all-stars, obviously, and health. But, Gary Payton II is a huge player, and he's a really good defender. And as with the fact that the Warriors are trying to groom their young guys to have an increased workload so that their all-stars don't have the burden, Gary Payton II is this young guy who could have fulfilled that. And so I think part of that taps into the fact that the Warriors want to save money, but they're also bullish of, hey, let's make sure we carve out even more minutes for a guy like Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, Wiseman, some of their young guys. But it remains to be seen. I mean, I think that they could have had it both ways, and I really think Gary Payton II is a good player that they should have spent on, but we'll see if the Warriors can get away with it.
Mark, you're preaching to the choir. I'm done touching on the subject just because I feel like I've exhausted every viewer and listener of this show complaining about the team losing Gary Payton II. You don't have to tell me how valuable he was, man. That hurts. And you're right. I just don't understand the why of it. Even when you talk about the minutes thing, they could have still found the minutes just because I don't understand the idea of putting pressure on this veteran core of Steph, Dre, and Clay with heavy regular season minutes when you really want to save them for the postseason. And those minutes could have been there for them by resting the core a bit more, not playing them on back-to-back nights. I just feel like the minutes would have been there, and I'm just perplexed why. I never saw. Here's the weird thing, and maybe you can agree or disagree. The Warriors, I just don't think ever valued Gary Payton II the way you and I and anyone else who loved Gary Payton II did. I mean, they never played him in either of those play-in games in 2021. They didn't sign him initially and claim him off waivers to start the 2021-2022 season. They just kept him out of various really important moments. His minutes numbers were always really low. I just don't think they saw in him what I think a lot of other people do. The why of that is a mystery to me. I'd love to talk to Bob Myers and or Steve Kerr about that someday, even though they'd probably just spin it and make me look like a fool in asking that question. But it's just weird to me. But you're right, man. And you wrote another column, and I'm going to go back to your 4 keys real quick. But you wrote another column during the NBA Finals. It was called "Warriors Depth Makes Stephen Curry's Rough Night in Game 5 a non-factor. When we come back, I would love to hear your insights and your opinion, given you cover the NBA for the NBA. You've been doing this for a long time. I respect your opinion tremendously. I'm curious to know if you think the Warriors have the depth still to repeat as a world champion, because I feel like that was one of their biggest strengths. But first, I got to talk about a longtime sponsor of this program, Built Bar. People who watch the show or listen to the show regularly have heard me talk about Built Bar endlessly. I love these things. I'm officially on a diet, folks, and I feel like Built Bar is one of the best ways to do that, simply because on average, each Built Bar only has 4 grams of sugar, which is incredibly low. Yet on average, they're packed with 17 grams of protein. And it's not just protein, it's collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently. So whenever you're hungry, whenever you got the munchies, instead of gorging on really bad things like a candy bar, cake, ice cream, a Built Bar only gives you 130 calories. It makes you feel full with all that protein, and you're hopefully not gaining that unnecessary weight. So go to Built.com right now. Use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Again, use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off your order.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. You can follow NBA writer Mark Medina at @MarkG_Medina. He covers the NBA for the NBA, formerly a beat writer covering the Golden State Warriors. Again, the Warriors' depth, this whole thing could end up being a beautiful thing. Kuminga, despite being only 19, Moody, despite being only 20, Wiseman, who's only played half a season, he's only 21. They could fulfill their potential, and all these concerns that myself and many others have could just go away. But these are also very young players and very unproven players. Do you have faith that these 3 players, who are really the core of the bench outside of Jordan Poole, and maybe DiVincenzo, who they just recently picked up, and I love your insights on him as well, do you think the depth is going to be strong enough for them to repeat as world championships? And your thoughts on just their offseason activity pertaining to that bench?
Yeah, well, I think the Warriors still have a lot of strong depth, but is it strong enough? That remains to be seen. I mean, I think on paper going into next season, the Clippers are the most favored team in the Western Conference because Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are expected to be back and healthy. They're basically retaining their entire team because they were of the mind that, hey, look, they missed the playoffs because Kawhi and Paul George were hurt. Kawhi missing the entire season, Paul George with a bad stroke of bad luck, getting COVID in the play-in elimination game. So they're just running it back. And beyond Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, they have a lot of depth, a lot of really good wings, a lot of good forwards. But that is on paper. And so, they've had a checkered injury history over the years. And so you just never know. With the Warriors, I think the thing that they're leaning into beyond the obvious with their all-stars is that they feel like these young guys that they're going to unleash are ready to take that next step. Part of it because of their potential, part of it because they've really leaned in on their player development, which is not to say they didn't have that before, but they've really put more resources and more emphasis on that so that they're ready for it. But I think this goes back to the earlier conversation we had, about them losing Gary Payton II. I think that you could have had it both ways where, okay, you're trying to groom these young guys to get more playing time. But to your point, you have to kind of do it the right way and do it organically where they're earning their minutes. They're not just playing it because they're young guys.
Agreed.
Sometimes that happens when you're on a lottery rebuilding team because you don't have any other players. And so I think that they're trying to toe the line of, hey, let's have it all open season, open competition as far as rotations go. And if those young guys win out, well, they'll get more playing time. Well, someone like Gary Payton II would have provided a lot of good internal competition from positional battles here. And so if those young guys wouldn't have been ready, Gary Payton II would have been a great reinforcement. Now, if next season, we're seeing guys like Moses Moody really, make leaps and bounds and Jordan Poole continue to grow at the way that he's been growing the last year, then okay, it makes sense. Gary's playing time's dwindling a little bit. And then that's when the baton shift happens. But right now, I think it's a little bit too soon. But you know what? There is a way that the Warriors can get away with this. But it is a gamble, I think, to say the least.
Oh, I totally agree with you, man. We are exactly on the same page. I just don't understand. I think you nailed it on the head by saying that this would have been a lot more easier to stomach if the transition was done organically, meaning like the youngsters showed that they were ready to kind of take over that mantle of carrying the weight, because this team's depth is just vitally important. And the why of losing Gary Payton II, man, that's gonna sting for a while. You know, your third key on your list of four. We're almost there. Two more questions I have for you, Mark, and I will let you go, man. Thank you so much for taking time to join Locked On Warriors today. Was replacing Mike Brown, who went on to become the head coach of the Sacramento Kings. He actually took Leandro Barbosa with him. I thought Leandro would have been an excellent fit to replace Mike Brown as the second assistant coach following Kenny Atkinson, who has formerly been promoted to the top assistant position. But the Warriors kept it in-house. They promoted Jama Malalela, if I pronounced that correctly. Your thoughts on him? Are you familiar with him? He was an assistant coach for the Warriors last year, and now he is the number 2 guy. Your thoughts on Malalela as the new assistant coach of the Golden State Warriors, or the promoted assistant head coach?
Yeah, well, I think the Warriors did a good job on this front. I mean, one, they thought they were going to be losing Kenny Atkinson to the Charlotte Hornets, and
right.
He had cold feet. I don't think, unlike some of the Twitter speculation, had nothing to do with, he's getting assurances that he's going to replace Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr's not going anywhere. But I think Kenny Atkinson knew, hey, I got a good thing going being with the Warriors, seeing the culture there, and he's a brilliant basketball mind. Steve Kerr always talks about how he really knows how to look at analytics and apply it for actual basketball decisions. So he's kind of that bridge between the analytics department and the coaching department. And he also has a lot of good history when it comes to player development. So I think that that's going to do instrumental things for the young guys. As far as Jama Malalea, he worked a lot with the young guys, most specifically with Jonathan Kuminga and James Wiseman. So I think that there's that relationship that he has with those young guys. And before he joined the Warriors, he was with the Toronto Raptors in a familiar role where, that's another team that's really good about player development. So I think that they checked a lot of good boxes in promoting, really good talent, but also promoting from within to kind of ensure that roster continuity.
Absolutely.
I think with that, they're able to keep the continuity as well as benefit from having, new perspectives, new voices, new ideas. So I think that, mission accomplished on that front.
Absolutely right, man. I agree with you there. And your last key was just keeping a good thing going, right? I mean, the Warriors are now officially in the hunt for a repeat world title. They've done it once so far in this dynasty. My greedy side is telling me go for the three-peat. I think they do have the talent, which is, again, that Gary Payton II decision hurts that and then some. But whatever, man. We're moving on. My question to you is, do you think the Warriors are going to add any other free agents? They added DiVincenzo. I'd love your thoughts on him because I don't know a lot about him. I'm going to bring an expert on him on this show soon. So if you have anything additional to add regarding DiVincenzo, I'd love to hear it. But do you think there's anyone else out there the Warriors could still add, or do you think this is it for the Warriors? And they're just going to roll next year with the roster they have now?
Yeah, I mean, it's all just going to be veteran minimum deals, and as well as seeing if they could coax Andre Iguodala to continue to just extend his career. I mean, his role is going to continue to be reduced, but having that veteran voice, that de facto assistant coach, I think that is also another thing that they view in terms of player development for the young guys. As far as, Dante DiVincenzo, look, this was basically Gary Payton II's replacement. He's a good defensive player. Their hope is that by adding him, that mitigates the loss of Gary Payton II while also saving some money here. And I think that he is a good player. I just think Gary Payton II's better. But I do understand that, look, it's not my money that I'm spending. And the Warriors are also making the calculus of, when you're committing this much money, you're multiplying it basically by 4 because of luxury taxes. So they're using the calculus of, will this specific move ensure or derail championship hopes? And I think that's where they fell in line with Gary Payton II. And on the other end, when you're talking about Kevon Looney, I think that illustrates kind of the thing that I was mentioning about, making sure that the cart isn't before the horse. they made sure they spent on Kevon Looney, not just to retain his services because of how valuable he is as a role player, but also anticipating the possibility of James Wiseman of not knowing when he'll be available, if there's any health setbacks. So they knew that worst case scenario, they at least have Kevon Looney to provide some service at the center spot because there is that unknown with Wiseman. But as far as everything keeping it together, obviously Steph, Clay, and Draymond aren't going anywhere. They're not going to mess around. They're going to secure extensions with Andrew Wiggins and Jordan Poole. That's not going to happen right away, mostly just from a timeline standpoint because free agency, there's so many moving parts, but expect those deals to be finalized before training camp happens. So they know, if nothing else, they have those all-stars. They have Andrew Wiggins. They have Jordan Poole. And, that's a really good combination to lean on to try to defend their title.
Absolutely right, man. You can follow Mark Medina on Twitter at @MarkG_Medina. He writes for the NBA. He covers the NBA. I've been following your content for years, man. Just keep up the great work, dude. It seems like you're right on the perfect path, dude. Anything else you like to promote before I let you go? I mean, any other ventures, books in the makings? Promote away, if anything, please.
I don't have any book deals, but Cyrus, I appreciate the kind words. Always good. Has been good seeing you out in the field over the years.
You too, man.
Appreciate all the good work you do on the podcast. And yeah, as far as promotions, work at NBA.com, do work with NBA TV, it's Fox Sports Radio, and FS1 and Spectrum Sportsnet down in LA. And yeah, you can find my work at NBA.com. Twitter handles MarkG_Medina, and Instagram handles Medina Syracuse. So I think if you tap in all those things, that's your way to, read and follow any of my work, whether it's, written or broadcast.
I love it. Are you a California kid by nature? Because you've covered the Lakers, you've covered the Warriors. Where are you actually from?
No, I'm not a California kid at all. I grew up in the Northeast in Pennsylvania, went to school in Syracuse for college, and then I wound up coming out to LA for an internship with the LA Times and haven't left the state since. There's been a lot of stops along the way, but I've been able to, do a lot of things as far as covering the Lakers, then covering the Warriors, then having some national NBA roles with USA Today and now NBA.com. And as much as I've been moving around the state, I've stayed in California since then.
Absolutely, man. It's the Golden State for a reason, baby. Mark, always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much. And I hope to have you on back soon. This was an absolute joy, brother. Thank you.
Likewise. Appreciate you.
Thanks, man. And for everyone else, you can follow me on Twitter, Cyrus Saatsaz, @DogSurfRoadshow, and this program on Twitter, @LockedOnDubs. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Later.